Intro Accounting 1. In this video, we are going to go over aging of accounts receivable, which is an allowance method, and we're also going to go over percentage of sales, which is also an allowance method. Those methods are allowed to estimate the amount of accounts receivable that will not be collected. So even the best managed companies are not going to collect on some of their accounts receivable. So they're going to estimate an amount that they will not collect. You are going to learn a new account. It's called the allowance for doubtful accounts. That account is a contra asset. Well, you know a regular asset, the normal balance is a debit. So allowance for doubtful accounts, the normal balance will be a credit. You will see it's a contra account, so it will subtract from the regular account. Okay, so here's what I need for you to do. I need for you, if you haven't already, go into Blackboard and print off this practice problem on those two methods. All right, so that's in Blackboard along with my video. Okay, so the first one we're going to go over is the percentage of sales method. So here's what the problem says. During 2000 XX, Clay Company had sales of $525,000, all on account. Clay estimates uncollectible accounts to be 2% of sales. At December 31st, 2000 XX, accounts receivable is $122,000. And there is an existing balance of $2,000 credit in the allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, this is the percentage of sales method, which means it's an income statement approach. The allowance for doubtful accounts is on the balance sheet. So this particular method, you will ignore an existing balance and allowance for doubtful accounts. Do not include it in your journal entry. Okay, so here's all you're going to do. You're going to take $525,000 and you're going to multiply it by 2%. Now remember, 2% is 0.02, not 0.2. All right, so now you're going to take 525,000 times 0.02, and that gives you 10,500. Now we're going to make the journal entry. So we've got debit, we've got credit. So we're going to debit uncollectible account expense. Boy, that's a long one. Draw a line clearly separating. So, and that's 10,500. And then you're going to credit allowance for uncollectible accounts. $10,500. And that's it. So the percentage of sales method is pretty simple. All you're going to do is find the credit sales in the problem, multiply it by the percentage that they're estimating they will not collect, and then you make your journal entry. Remember, do not look to see if there's an existing balance and allowance for doubtful accounts. Just ignore it. It does not affect the percentage of sales method. Okay, so now we're going to go over the aging receivables method. Well, the aging of receivables is going to take you a little bit longer than the percentage of sales. So, aging of receivables, they give you a schedule. And that schedule includes amounts that they anticipate they are not going to collect. So you can see that as the longer it gets overdue, the likelihood that they're not going to collect it. So they start with 0.2%. Now remember that. I did it that way, the same as the lab. 0.2%, if you convert that to a best decimal, will be 0.002. So be careful in that. All right, so 0.2%, and then it goes all the way to 55. Well, the longer it is overdue, the more likely they're not going to collect it. All right, so when you do the schedule, you just multiply it out. So 70,000 times 0.2%. Be careful with your calculator. Remember, if it's a decimal, it's 0.002. That equals 140. Then we do the next layer. 50,000 times 4%. That equals 2,000. Next layer, 15,000 times 8%. That equals 1,200. Next layer, 8,000 times 55%. That equals 4,400. And then when you're done, total it up. So all of these numbers originally equal 7,740. Okay, so one of the questions in my practice is it says, based on the aging of accounts receivable, is the unadjusted balance too high or too low? Well, originally your number is 7,740. However, it states that the allowance for uncollectible accounts has a credit balance. You will take that into account when you do the aging of receivables method. So if it's a credit balance, you will subtract that balance. If it's a debit balance, you will add. Write that in your notes. Credit balance, you will subtract. Debit, you will add. Okay, so right now, it's 7,740. However, because they have a $1,000 credit balance, you will subtract that. So right now, that is too high. So when you make your journal entry, you're only going to make it for less 1,000. You're only going to make it for 6,740. Okay? All right, so it's going to be the same accounts as it was over here. So you're going to debit uncollectible account expense. For 6,740. Okay, not 7,740. Okay, 6,000. And then when you credit, you're going to credit allowance for doubtful accounts, 6,740. Okay? All right, so that's the first requirement that you will see in the lab. The second requirement, it's going to ask you to post to a T account. So let me draw a line. So it's going to ask you to post. So it has a T account, and it's allowance for doubtful accounts. Now remember, that's a contra asset. So the normal balance is a credit. Okay, so it had an existing balance in allowance for doubtful accounts, and it told you that was a credit. Well, when you're done for the year, I'm going to draw a line, we will equal your original amount of the estimate, which is 7,740. Okay? But you're only going to make a journal entry for 6,740, and look what you do. You credited allowance for doubtful accounts, 6,740. And when you do, 1,000 plus 6,740 equals the final balance of 7,040. Okay? All right, the next thing that it's going to ask you to do, so I'm going to erase this now. The next thing it's going to ask you to do is to figure out the effects on the balance sheet. Okay, so they have a balance sheet. All right, and they have current assets. And they have XX. Then they have short-term investments. And then they have accounts receivable. can do this two ways. You could net it, so you could take the original amount of accounts receivable, which was $320,000, and then right beneath it, you are going to show the contra asset, which is allowance for doubtful accounts. You will show that right beneath it, which is $7,740. Okay? Now remember, that's the final number in that T account, $7,740. And when you take the difference between those two, it is $312,260. Or another way that you could just show it is you could show accounts receivable and then right next to it, so you would show net, and you could show that as $312,260. So either way is acceptable when you work in the lab. Okay? All right, so good luck in the lab.